It is incredibly important every single offseason to make sure that you're staying on top of the trends. Now, I know this is going to sound dumb. Trust me, I understand it. I mean, you're looking at an overall fantasy community that does not stop drafting. There have already been like $1.5-2 million worth of fantasy drafts this offseason. And every offseason, if you track those trends and just identify players that are moving up draft boards or going down, you are going to know that those players moving up, you can almost ride that ADP to the top versus those guys moving down. They're probably not going to stop moving down anytime soon, but we need to ask ourselves, okay, are these players now values? I mean, someone like Raheem Mostert, who we'll get to at the end of this video, y'all know a couple of weeks ago, I came out and I called him one of the worst picks in fantasy football when he was going in the 14th, 15th round. Well, now you're getting him in round 18, so we can go through and we can evaluate that stance yet again. But before we get into it, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. What are we talking about? Leave a comment letting me know why you think these players are falling down. And let's head over to our first running back. Let's go over to Cordarrelle Patterson. Now with Patterson, I don't even know if we should include him as a running back. This is someone that did not even average 10 carries a game last year. Obviously, in 2020, the usage was really weird. In 2019, he averaged 1.1 carries. Like, with Cordarrelle Patterson, he's a unicorn. Nobody is going to look like him. It's almost impossible to compare anyone to him. And this past season, he was the running back 15 on a points per game basis with only 9.5 carries a game, with only 4.5 targets a game, with 12% of his team's target share, which of course for a running back is elite. Now, I will say, Cordarrelle Patterson, despite Mike Davis being gone this upcoming season, is going to be in a worse spot overall because you have no Matt Ryan. With no Matt Ryan transitioning over to Marcus Mariota, this should be a much worse offense. On top of it, you're adding in Drake London. Kyle Pitts is going into year 2. So I think the overall necessity for Cordarrelle Patterson to be some massive receiver, I don't necessarily think it's going to be there. Now, of course, keep in mind Russell Gage and his 94 targets that he saw last year. They're going to be leaving the offense. Mike Davis and the 58 targets that he saw last year, they're going to be leaving this Atlanta Falcons offense as well. So maybe you can sit here and try to talk yourself in to some Cordarrelle Patterson, where this is a player that last month on Underdog Fantasy, let's go through and find this. He was being drafted around pick 80. So that was what? At the end of the 7th round, the beginning of the 8th round. And he's fallen almost exactly around. Now, instead of taking him at the 7-8 turn, you're going to be getting Cordarrelle Patterson at the 8-9 turn. And this should be a much more reasonable price point, especially on Underdog Fantasy when it's going to be best ball. Because what I want to do is I want to look up Cordarrelle Patterson's weekly game log here. Now, this is going to be something that's more applicable for those best ball formats, but if you're watching a fantasy football video in June, I'd imagine that you are hopping into some of those contests because that's where everyone is drafting right now. And here with Cordarrelle Patterson, from a week-to-week standpoint, you are naturally going to have some volatility with this kind of usage. If he's being used almost as the wide receiver 3 in his offense and a pseudo committee running back, this is going to come with volatility. If we look at his past season, I mean, less than 10 points week 1, less than 5 points halfway through the season in a single week, leaving the year off with a 4-point game, an 8-point game. So yeah, you are getting those down weeks. You're getting those weeks where Cordarrelle Patterson's not usable. He doesn't come away with the long reception. He doesn't come away with the touchdown. But with Cordarrelle Patterson in this kind of usage, in this kind of involvement in his offense, he inherently comes with those spike weeks as well. You're seeing Cordarrelle Patterson with the week of 34 points. This was because he had 3 receiving touchdowns, which of course that's going to be hard to project for Cordarrelle Patterson to ever happen. But then another week, 24 points, 16, 18, 14, 18, 19, 27. The 27-point week is because you can see this is a player coming away with 2 rushing touchdowns as well. And with Tyler Algier, nobody's really expecting Algier to come in and see the exact workload that you had from Mike Davis this past season. Of course, Mike Davis was a very bad running back. Mike Davis was horrible. Remember, this was a player that we were avoiding like the plague in drafts last year. but Mike Davis still had 140 carries. Mike Davis still had 58 targets in this offense. Tyler Algier is not going to have that workload, and we should expect overall regression from this offense. But for Cordarrelle Patterson now to be going as the running back 30, the running back 31, when he finishes the running back 15 last season on a points per game basis, and he brings the volatility that we are looking for in this format, Cordarrelle Patterson went from a player that, I'm not too excited about drafting, to now I find myself drafting Patterson with a lot of these teams, because if you go with the hero running back approach and you grab your elite running back in round 1, whether that's Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, whether that's you getting Jonathan Taylor at the 101, you can then slam wide receiver value through the middle rounds. You can grab your elite level quarterback, find Cordarrelle Patterson as your running back 2, and he is going to have the upside on a week-to-week basis to finish as a running back 1. Now, of course, very old and in a bad offense. Two combination of things you do not want to be seeing from your running backs, but that's baked into his price. You wouldn't have him going this low in drafts if it wasn't. And also, if you are wondering, Mason, what are you talking about with best ball drafts? What are you talking? How are people in real money fantasy drafts right now? Where have you been? Are you living under a rock? Have you not seen us live streaming every single day on Underdog Fantasy, the most fun place you can get into real money fantasy football drafts in 2022? You can get into them today. I know y'all are seeing us stream these every single day. Just make sure you go sign up and use promo code FLOCK with the link in the description. They will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So yes, you heard that right. They are going to be paying you to try out these drafts. You're going to get paid to play fantasy football. On top of that, you'll get my rankings, our dynasty rankings, our dynasty rookie rankings. And most importantly, you have a ton of fun. Link in the description, promo code FLOCK. But now let's go over and let's go to a running back that made our do not draft running back list. We called him a running back that you had to avoid earlier in the season, but now he's fallen. He used to go at the 3-4 turn. He used to go at the end of the 3rd round. Now I'm sometimes seeing him at the beginning of the 5th. Cam Akers. Now with Cam Akers, like I've said, I've never had anything against the player. I loved him coming out of Florida State. Why did we call Cam Akers a must avoid running back? Why did I say he was a player that I really had none of through the first month of Underdog Fantasy this year? It was because you had him going before elite level wide receiver ones. You had Cam Akers going before someone crazy to look back on now, but Deontay Johnson was going like 6 picks behind Cam Akers. And I was looking at this going, okay, well, if we can get Josh Jacobs 2 to 3 rounds later than Cam Akers, I'll pass on Akers at the end of the 3rd. I'll take Josh Jacobs in the 6th with Cam Akers. They bring in Kyron Williams this offseason with Cam Akers. Obviously, we had the inefficient play at the end of last year, but we were able to excuse that inefficient play because he had the torn Achilles. He was about 6 to 7 months removed from that torn Achilles. And if we go back and if we look at the ceiling that we had from Cam Akers at the end of his rookie season in particular, you're looking at Cam Akers that went through a stretch of his last 6 games that year. We're including the playoffs here. 21 carries, 29 carries, 15 carries, 21, 28, 18. That's averaging 22, 23 carries a game, including a playoff stretch. Getting involved as a receiver as well. 1, 3, 3, 4, 2, 1 targets. So 2 to 3 targets a game. That's the workload you're looking for in an elite level offense. And I think people have just gotten smarter overall when they're looking at roster constructions, looking at having to bring in those wide receivers in rounds 3 and at the beginning of round 4 instead of reaching on one of those running backs like Cam Akers. But now that Akers has seen this fall, and his situation has gotten better, I'm now drafting Cam Akers because you've had Kyron Williams going down with a broken foot. Kyron Williams had to have surgery on that broken foot, and he's not going to be back until late training camp. And for a rookie, that's going to be detrimental to earn the trust of this coaching staff. Now you're going to be looking at Cam Akers as a running back that's going to be, I don't want to say splitting time, but only going up against Darrell Henderson. And while I do think Darrell Henderson's a fine value in his own right in these drafts, we know Darrell Henderson, one thing he's not a pass catching running back. So Cam Akers should 100% get the work on 3rd downs now. He's in a better situation than where he was a month ago, but just because I think people have gotten smarter with roster construction, they've adequately pushed him down draft boards where now, we had Cam Akers as a must-avoid running back in the 3rd round, but now you're getting him at the 4 or 5 turn. Sign me up. I'm drafting Cam Akers there every day of the week. And now, similarly, another running back that we had in that same video saying, stop drafting these RBs, these running backs, some of the worst values in fantasy, Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, I don't know if it was our video alone that made this man fall as much as he did. Like I said, this was a player that was going in like the 14th round of these drafts, and now you're getting him in the 18th. I literally had to go to Twitter. I had to search RotoWorld. I had to find anything that I could. I was looking up saying, what happened? Why are people all of a sudden off of Raheem Mostert? The only thing I could find was Raheem Mostert had a kid a couple weeks ago. So I honestly want to say that people maybe saw our video and saw all our red flags with the Raheem Mostert, including the injury history, the contract, the fact that, dear God, like I said, this is the one statistic, this is the one fact that should be enough for you to never think about drafting Raheem Mostert in fantasy. The man's 30 years old, or turning 30 this year, and he has had one game in his NFL career with 20 or more carries, including the playoffs. That should be enough for you to go, okay, yeah, I'm out. I'm not going to be drafting him. My main concern was people were just automatically assuming that Raheem Mostert was going to be the running back 2 here in Miami. When we looked at the Sony Michel contract and we were like, okay, well, this Sony Michel deal is almost identical to what you have with Raheem Mostert. So we know that you're most likely going to get one of Myles Gaskin, Sony Michel, Raheem Mostert. One of these guys are probably going to be cut before the season starts. I think it's more and more likely now that's going to be Myles Gaskin, considering the actions taken by this new coaching staff. They go out there and pay Chase Edmonds a lot of money. Then they immediately bring in Mostert. Then they also bring in Sony Michel. I think this coaching staff wants nothing to do with Myles Gaskin. But nonetheless, now it's adequately being priced. I'm seeing some drafts where Sony Michel goes within 5 picks of Mostert. This is where he should have been drafted the entire time. If you find yourself to be a Raheem Mostert fan, if you go, oh my gosh, the speed is absurd, we don't exactly know who the starting running back's going to be in Miami, maybe Chase Edmonds is, if that's your opinion, I hate to walk back on what I said. I hate to do the same thing that we did with Cam Akers, but the price is adjusted. The situation hasn't changed. People have just found out that, oh yeah, you probably shouldn't have been valuing him there in the first place. So if you can get Raheem Mostert in the last round, the second to last round, and you like that price point, who am I to tell you no? Who am I to tell you no? I'm drafting Samaje Perine in the last round in some of these drafts. So I have to go back. I have to walk back on our case of saying that Cam Akers, Raheem Mostert are running backs that you cannot draft. And now they're fine. They're fine to go through and target. And now our next guy that we are going to be looking at has consistently been a faller. This was a running back that made one of our falling RB videos right after the NFL draft. Drafters reacted right after the NFL draft. He fell about a round in ADP. But since then, he's been in a free fall. That's why I do think it's very risky when you see these players falling down ADP list. I'm not going to be talking about Cleveland here because I'm recording this video in advance and I don't want to say anything about the Deshaun Watson situation that's completely irrelevant 4 days from now. But when you start to notice these trends of these players going later and later, it's almost best to just sit it out. It's almost best to just watch these players continue to fall and say, hell, I'll wait 2 months and then I'll start drafting them at a much larger discount. That's what you're seeing with Antonio Gibson now because he has not stopped falling. Now with Antonio Gibson, this is a running back that's currently going as the running back 23 in drafts. And that hasn't fallen as much as just his overall draft position. Now he's going at pick 67. I've seen Antonio Gibson in a lot of these drafts fall to the 7th round. So now we need to reevaluate our Antonio Gibson stance. Now, of course, the bearish case with Antonio Gibson is this is a running back that led the NFL in fumbles last year. And we then saw his coaching staff, his overall front office, bring in Brian Robinson as a top 100 draft pick, re-sign J.D. McKissic. Now, I want to get ahead of this. I am one to always say, you know what? Fumbles don't matter too much. Very similar to drops in fantasy football. The fantasy football community are going to 9 times out of 10 overreact to fumbles. They're going to overreact to drops because they are small sample occurrences that are not hyper predictive season to season as what you would find with yards per route run, target share, overall targets per game, even fantasy points per game. Like all those other measures are going to be so much more valuable than looking at something like fumbles. But if I was ever going to be concerned with a running back having a fumbling issue, it would be a running back that was a former wide receiver in college. It would be a running back that's not used to seeing 300 touches in a season. He doesn't know how to protect the football. So those are the bearish cases with Antonio Gibson. But now that he has fallen this far, I'm fine going through and listing out some of the positive cases. Now, if you weren't following us way back in the 2020 draft, y'all, back then, I would just annoy people every single video. And I don't want to act like I was a genius. I was also annoying people telling them Juju Smith-Schuster was good. Clearly he wasn't. But I was annoying people acting like Antonio Gibson was a for sure thing. He was going in round 3 of Dynasty rookie drafts. And I was looking at Antonio Gibson and Jonathan Taylor in the same rookie class. And everybody was in agreement, including myself, that Jonathan Taylor was elite. He was an elite size adjusted athlete. And I was going, okay, well, Antonio Gibson's 228 pounds. He runs a 4.39 40-yard dash. Jonathan Taylor, 226 pounds. He runs a 4.39 40-yard dash. Like, Antonio Gibson is an elite size-adjusted athlete. And like we said, he's going into year 3. We can assume that someone that was a former wide receiver in college is going to continue to develop as a running back. And we can assume that they are going to continue to get better in that area of the game. And with Antonio Gibson, he took steps forward this past season. With Antonio Gibson, he went from 12 carries a game to 16 carries a game. He went from 48% of this team's overall carries per game to 57%. He bumped up his target share a little bit. The touchdowns came down. We know touchdowns are going to be volatile season to season. So we have seen Antonio Gibson trend to be better overall. It does come down to, do you think fumbles are an issue? If Antonio Gibson goes out there and he coughs up the football, week 1, week 2, I think Brian Robinson will eventually work his way into having a role in this offense. Now, there's also an outside chance that that doesn't happen. We see an injury to J.D. McKissick, and all of a sudden Antonio Gibson learns how to pass protect. He learns how to catch the ball, which he already knows. He was a former wide receiver. It is in the range of outcomes for Antonio Gibson to be a running back 1. So I can't say anymore that Antonio Gibson's a bad value in these drafts. I think Antonio Gibson, if you want to go get him in the middle of round 6, I'm honestly still looking to avoid. I will say that. At his ADP, I usually find myself taking a wide receiver like Drake London. I usually find myself taking an elite quarterback like Jalen Hurts. Like, I've taken Jalen Hurts over Antonio Gibson so many times before. I've taken Josh Jacobs over him. But if he falls to round 7 or the very end of round 6, and you're looking at like Antonio Gibson versus a wide receiver that you're not too excited about, hell, just go Antonio Gibson. And now our last running back is someone that I found myself drafting, but I was never excited about it. And this is just a fair warning. And I made this mistake. I have probably lost value on Dameon Pierce with where I've been drafting him. And we've said this out loud, like, you can notice these trends in your draft when you're drafting every day like I am, that you are seeing a given player always at the top of ADP. Every single time I'm sitting there in the 11th, in the 12th, and 13th, wherever Pierce is going. I'm on the clock. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, we need a running back. Dameon Pierce is at the top of ADP. He's fallen 8 picks past his ADP. Sure, we'll go ahead and we'll draft him. And then the next draft, same thing. I'm like, okay, yeah, we need a running back. Dameon Pierce is 11 picks past his ADP. Let's just go ahead and draft him. I don't really like him, but we'll take him. Then he continues to fall in ADP. And now we're sitting there going, okay, should we have been drafting him the entire time? Because if we revisit the Dameon Pierce profile, this is a player that was not hyper productive at Florida at all. This is a player that, if y'all remember, LaMichael Pirine, someone that was a non-factor with the New York Jets a few years ago, he was the starting running back over Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce, the most carries he's ever saw in a season at Florida was 106. Now, a lot of people want to look at the efficiency on a per touch basis. They want to look at the fact that he was so much better than the other running backs in his own backfield when he was getting the ball, and just blame the overall Florida coaching staff on not using him effectively. But if we look at his size, if we look at his athletic testing, he's not necessarily a great prospect. Goes to the beginning of round 4. I think with Dameon Pierce, he's a player that I personally need to stop drafting. I don't necessarily expect that the fall stops anytime soon. He should be a safe guy to project to have a roster spot, given the investment in the fact that this offense has nothing else. And that's why I'm not too upset with myself for drafting Dameon Pierce, despite the fact that he has fallen about around an ADP over the past month, because there is nobody else in Houston. But I need to stop drafting someone at the top of ADP, even if I don't like them, just because they look like a good value on paper, because that player may continue to fall in ADP, and then you thought you were taking him at a value, and all of a sudden, he's fallen even further. But thank you again, of course, for being a part of the flock, supporting the channel. I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this video. Go down there, drop a like, subscribe, and if you want to get in a draft with me today, if you want to go have some fun, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK. Find the link in the description. That's all I got for you. Hope you have a great day, and hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.